Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. Before we begin with Kris's unparalleled metaphysical content, I know that many of you watching have felt a sense of being ungrounded, unhinged, or out of balance in these times. I know. I've felt this way too. Kris's teachings have similarities to popular ideas such as the law of attraction and the secret. The difference is that Kris's knowledge goes even deeper into reality creation and helps resolve many of the problems identified with the law of attraction. The information he shares helps restore grounding and that sense of balance that many of us have lost in these times. If you're ready for the law of attraction and secret 2.0 and want to be a part of this fantastic community, then hit that like button, subscribe, drop a comment below, and press the bell icon so that you get notified when Kris releases cool, new metaphysical content. Kris also offers life-changing online seminars, private sessions, and mentoring sessions, which are all linked in the description below. Glad you're here with us, and let's jump into it. And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. And I know last time we had this really interesting discussion. We were getting into a lot of talk about our ancestors and different aspects of that. And Serge, I came across an interesting article. It was in the mainstream. I don't remember exactly who published it, but it was a mainstream newspaper that there'd been archaeologists had discovered human remains that they dated to be about 30,000 years old. And they were puzzled because the person had an amputation above their knee. And this had come from the Stone Age. And so they're trying to figure out how that was possible with stone tools. And I know Kris has mentioned to me and has talked about in our channel as well, sometimes that there was our linear timeline, there were perhaps even more advanced civilizations because they said the amputation came from a surgically precise cut. It wasn't somebody bone had broken and was busted, that it clearly was done with surgical tools. So it's really upsetting the apple cart of our ideas in archaeology. So
I like when apple carts get upset sometimes. Makes the best kind of pie.
Yeah, well, and from talking with Kris and what he's been talking about it from time to time, it actually, it didn't rack my brain at all. I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. I'm like, I wonder how long it'll take to figure it out. But yeah, so that was really interesting. But I thought that was interesting timing too, that came when we were been talking about that topic, and some of those things have been coming up.
Yeah, it is. And I've read about similar things in the past, and that one too is very interesting. And I know that when you suggested that this might be a topic for Kris to discuss, that the light bulbs went off in my head, meaning, got a hit on that. So we'll let him have his say.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm excited.
Now we trust that you are comfortable.
Oh, very comfortable. Thanks, Kris.
And we thank you for your consideration, even if it is 30,000 years old. Considerations never go out of style.
All right.
So the article that you mentioned is not the first of its kind, and it will not be the last of its kind either. And it appears, if you take the time to look at this kind of information, these kinds of news releases, that seemingly discoveries appear to be getting older and older and older. Initially, for instance, it was thought that humans came to the Americas via the Bering Strait approximately 10,000 years ago, shortly after the Ice Age. Now, they have already discovered human settlements, and of course, the remains thereof, that are 13 and 14,000 years old, therefore several thousand years older than the original assumptions. And these are settlements in the Americas. And now they're also discovering that humans or their ancestors did not only come through the Bering Strait, but could have also navigated from the west to the east across the Pacific. Polynesians, Chinese, Asian cultures, others on that side. And now there is also debate that ancient Egyptians would have been, as well as Phoenicians, also able to traverse the Atlantic, going west, crossing the Atlantic. There are more curiosities that would truly open and kind of Pandora's box all over the place. So they do try to keep a lid on these things because they do not necessarily want to, first of all, have to revamp the entire humanity or human timeline and all of their developments. And they would often like to still present the idea that human settlements, ancient human settlements, were all isolated one from the other. And it really is a bother when there is evidence that shows that quite the contrary. No settlements, or very few, were actually completely isolated one from the other. There was trade of different kinds. This is still a hot topic to find cranberries and tobacco, which is only found on the American continent in ancient Egyptian sarcophagi. How did they get there? So there are all sorts of interesting things. And eventually, the entire topography of the human experience on your world will eventually have to be revamped. It will have to take into account a much larger history of human development. There are so many other things to in line, especially with the recent discovery that you mentioned. A clear, surgically precise cut to amputate. It is already understood that the ancient Mayans and Incas had surgically precise procedures performed on people who survived the procedures up to and including skull surgery, because the bone plate, the cranial plates, started to heal and regrow. How could they have done this? They had no surgical stainless steel devices, but they used specific kinds of obsidian that can be sharper than a surgical scalpel. Even the ancient writings in India, for instance, several thousand years ago, describe different kinds of surgical procedures. They describe different kinds of cosmetic procedures. Ancient Egyptians also had advanced cosmetic procedures. And that includes surgical procedures. There are descriptions in the ancient Indian writings, for instance, that are actually very advanced in terms of what they supposedly knew at that time concerning many, many facets of life, including childbirth. So it is no wonder that such a thing can stomp scientists and researchers, because it is usually assumed that people from the Stone Age might have been only able to communicate with clicks and grunts and not be that intelligent. And yet, that kind of procedure posits a very high degree of intelligence and a developed society. Because a developed society is one that actually helps to take care of its less fortunate ones. Those that may have had diseases or accidents or medical difficulties of different kinds. That is a sign of a developed nation. And it must also be brought to light that your present earth, the way it is now, has undergone several different kinds of transformations, as we suggested, either from large meteoric or asteroid impact, large tectonic plate shifts, volcanic eruptions, pole shifts, and many other things. Entire civilizations and continents have disappeared, gone back into the earth, if you like, been reprocessed. There are artifacts found that also present a certain enigma. A metal bell in the range of 300 million years found in coal, composed of a very bizarre amalgamation of metals, still functioning. And this is not the only example, but the main point is that you will always keep finding all manner of older and older things, because you are discovering yourselves. And by that we mean that even though it is understood that the so-called past not necessarily exist, and that the so-called future does not necessarily exist as well, but that the present moment is paramount, there is a certain flow that involves what you would call the past or the future. So in certain terms, it is valid. On the overall scheme, however, only the present moment exists for you. But your species diverges in many different developments, many different probable lines. And these constitute what you would call your future or your past, all divergent from the present moment. this creates a certain, how do we say, a certain kind of paradox that would challenge the established views that, for instance, your species has evolved entirely in an linear fashion, perhaps along the lines of what Darwin suggested. And yet there is thinking along those very lines that suggest that may not necessarily always be the case. Your world is not cast in stone. It is not set in cement, if you like. There are areas of flexibility that would require a deeper reflection upon the subject matter. Why? Because even though it appears to you, your species, and of course your physical senses, your eyes, your nose, and so on and so forth, that you live in a material, concrete reality, the truth of the matter is that you live in a mental universe. You basically live in your minds. And the external expression of your internal living is therefore projected onto the canvas of what you call reality. So you are always offering yourselves little breadcrumbs, little tidbits of information that challenge the status quo, because the status quo itself is meant to be questioned. The established notions of reality are meant to be questioned. Because if they are not questioned, and you assume that this is all there is to you, to your life, to the universe, then you effectively box yourselves in intellectually, rationally, emotionally, feeling-wise, imaginatively, and yet the very core of your being is a powerful creative engine, if you like, a mechanism of immense creativity, a source of unbelievable desire that literally propels you, and therefore your entire species and your race, through what you call time and space, to explore all of the possibilities that you are capable of exploring, and then some. So you leave yourselves these little breadcrumbs that challenge many notions. And time after time, this has the desired effect. It pushes back the boundaries, not of the past, not of the future, but it pushes back the very boundaries of creativity. Because you need to know that this is not your only life, and that at the end of this life, you are not extinguished like a flame of a candle. You're not snuffed out. You change your presentation. Just like when your suit that you wear throughout the day comes off, you don on another item of clothing. So when you are more or less done with this particular existence, you leave that behind, you leave the suit behind, and you don another one to prepare yourself for another adventure. And by contemplating all of the possibilities that are available to you and your species, then you more or less assert to yourselves that life is a continuity. It is not an end. Does this make sense to you?
Yeah, Kris, I follow you. Mm-hmm.
So, for example, in terms of the principle of reality creation, that you create your own reality, why would you create an event like this? Someone finding an ancient human being or their remains thereof, quite ancient in your terms, yet having had this intricate and successful medical procedure performed.
Well, I would think that we're bringing it to ourselves to expand and ask the questions you mentioned earlier that we're supposed to question reality. So I see it as something that's going to cause us to do that. And at least what I found is that questions in particular help us to expand our concepts and then have a perhaps richer experience.
Indeed, it puts your existence as a species in a different context, in a different atmosphere, where you can begin to, again, question the accepted norms about your reality and push those boundaries and actually begin to wonder, what else is there about us that can be discovered? What kind of world would have been part of this being's experience? So these are entirely valid questions, and they are not merely philosophical. They question the very foundation of accepted beliefs or assumptions about your world. And this goes to actually the very root assumptions, again, about your world, your universe. Exactly what is it? What is this universe about? Is it little more than so-called matter, antimatter, dark matter, white matter, electrons, protons, morons, and what have you? Is that all there is to life? Or is there something else at play here? And what part of the individual creates that kind of reality for that individual? That is also a very valid question. Now, of course, all of what we have said might be considered mere poppycock, because, of course, reality is real. Only that which is perceived by your senses is real. And everything else is not. But at the very same time, it also begs the question, if that is the case, then who are you? What are you? Are you nothing more than just amalgamation of tissues, organs, stitched together in the form of a body? And we spoke about this previously, people refer to themselves as not a body. They say, I am so-and-so. But where is so-and-so? Is it here? Is it in the nose? Is it in the eyes? When you refer to your eyes or your nose, you do not say, I, eyes, eye, nose, you say your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your ears, your body, your car, your house, your job, your city, your country, your planet. But who is the you in association with all of those things? It can be said it is just a figure of speech, but neurologically and linguistically, it is not. It is an unconscious distinction that showcases that you are different from your eyes, nose, ears, lips, mouth, tongue, head, brain, your car, your house, your country. You are distinct from all of these things. In the same way that when you get into your car, you do not say, I am now a car. You have a clear distinction between yourself and the car. The car could be an extension of you, taking you somewhere from point A to point B, in the same way that your body is an extension of you. And the you is even more than just your thoughts about yourself. Because you are not that either. They are just thoughts about yourself. So the main idea with all of this is that your species will always keep pushing the envelope in one form or another, just to keep things on an even keel, even if it means once in a while to upset an apple cart or 24 of them. Does all of this make sense to you?
Yes, Kris. Yeah, I find it fascinating.
Do you have any additional inquiry, please, or comments? Feel free.
Well, not for this episode. Maybe if we're getting close to break time, we could come up with some things after the break.
Indeed. Then enjoy your break.
Thank you, Kris. Thanks for watching, and if you would like to leave a question for Kris, drop it in the comments below. Myself, Serge, or someone from the Kris team will be checking and may use them to drive the discussion, put them in future episodes. So if you'd like to interact with the Kris community, feel free. Put your questions below, and we'd love to hear from you, and see you again next time.